Welcome. Today we're going to crack open the toolkit that nations use to build a better future for themselves. We're going to break down three massive ideas: economics, development, and planning. Okay, let's jump right in. So let's start with a feeling that I'm pretty sure we all know really well. You've got this long list of things you want, but the resources to actually get them, your time, your money, they're limited. It's a fundamental part of being human.
Well, in the world of economics, that core problem has a name, and it's a big one: scarcity. It's this simple but incredibly powerful idea that our wants are basically unlimited, but we live in a world with limited resources. Honestly, scarcity is the starting point for everything else we're going to talk about.
So, right, if we can't have everything, what do we have to do? We have to choose. Now, this is true for you and me, but it's also true for entire countries on a massive scale. And this is exactly why economics is so often called the science of choice.
The economist Lionel Robbins just nailed this idea way back in 1932. He basically said economics is the study of how we act when we're trying to achieve our goals, our ends, using limited resources or scarce means that we could use for all sorts of different things.
Okay, now here's where things get really interesting. Economics kind of has two different personalities. First, you've got positive economics, which is all about describing what is. It sticks to the facts, just objective analysis. But then you have normative economics, which is all about what ought to be, based on our values and goals.
Let me give you a super simple example to make this stick. A positive statement is something you can prove or disprove, like the unemployment rate is 5%. It's a fact. A normative statement, on the other hand, brings in an opinion or a value judgment. The government should reduce unemployment. See the difference? That's a goal, not a fact.
And that difference between what is and what ought to be, well, it leads us straight to a huge, massive question for any nation. Is the main goal just to get richer? Is a bigger economy automatically a better one?
Let's really chew on that for a second. When a country's economy grows, when its GDP goes up, does that automatically guarantee a better quality of life for all its citizens? For you, for me, for everybody?
This is where modern thinking draws a really important line in the sand. On one side, you have economic growth, which is all about increasing material wealth, a country's total income. But on the other side, you have human development, which is a much bigger idea. It's focused on actually improving the quality of people's lives.
So here's the crucial point. True development is about so much more than just money. It's got to include social progress, things like good education and healthcare. It needs political development, like a stable government, because without that, nothing lasts. And of course, it needs environmental development, making sure we're living sustainably. You need all three.
Okay, so if GDP alone doesn't tell the whole story, and it doesn't, then how in the world do we measure this bigger, more meaningful idea of a better life? How do we even know if we're making progress? Well, to tackle that exact problem, the United Nations Development Program created this really clever tool. It's called the Human Development Index, or just HDI, and is designed to give us a much more complete snapshot of how a country is really doing.
And what's so brilliant about the HDI is how it boils down progress into three key ingredients. First, a long and healthy life, which it measures using life expectancy. Second, knowledge, measured by education levels. And third, a decent standard of living, which is measured by income. It's a much richer picture, isn't it?
All right, so having a goal like improving your country's HDI score is great. But, a goal without a plan is just a wish. So that brings us to the next big question. How does a nation actually create the blueprint to get there?
And that is where economic planning enters the picture. It's basically the government's official game plan. It's a conscious, organized effort to steer the economy toward those big goals we've been talking about, like better jobs, a stable society, and a higher quality of life.
Now, there are different ways to do this. One classic approach is centralized planning. This is where the government really takes the driver's seat, making the big decisions about what gets produced and who gets what. The famous 5-year plans in China are a perfect example of this in action.
But then there's another approach: indicative planning. Here, the government acts more like a guide or maybe a co-pilot. It sets a direction and offers incentives, but pretty much lets the market do its thing. This strategy was used incredibly successfully by countries like Japan and South Korea to supercharge their growth after World War II.
So, let's step back for a second and put all these pieces together. We've got these three massive ideas: economics, development, and planning. How do they all fit together to form that complete toolkit for building a nation?
Think of it like this. Economics is the why. It's the science that explains why we have to make tough choices in the first place, because of scarcity. Then, development is the what. It defines what we're aiming for, that ultimate goal of a better quality of life. And finally, economic planning is the how. It's the practical, hands-on roadmap a country uses to get from here to there.
And this all brings us to a really powerful final thought from the Nobel-winning economist Amartya Sen. He said that development isn't really about money or buildings. It's about expanding people's freedoms and their opportunities to live the kind of life that they value. It's a profound way to think about what true progress is really all about.